Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. Before I start the video tonight, I want to wish Joe Robles a happy birthday. Joe, I know you're turning 14 in the next couple days, so happy birthday, brother. And I also want to thank his sister Ryan, who has been super supportive of the channel, always helping me with new ideas to make things work, so I appreciate you very much. Tonight I'm going to be joined by Storytime Cinema. I featured him in a recent video, and he seemed to get a great response from all of you, so I'm just trying to help him build his channel and return the favor for all the help that he's given me. After the video, please make sure to go to his channel, subscribe immediately. I'll leave the link to his channel in the description box below as well. Sit back, relax, and stay sinful. Story number 1. This story is a great example of what not to do. I was a stupid kid. My parents divorced when I was around 12 years old, and my dad moved into a house where the back door was next to a parking lot. The back door was one of those where the top half was a screen and the bottom half was metal. One day I was sitting at the table near the door, and a woman knocked on our door. She could see right into our house. The woman had what I now know as meth chin, but as a 12-year-old, I just thought she looked a little haggard. Her grayish hair was frizzy everywhere. She was missing teeth, and her clothes weren't weather appropriate. If I had to guess, I'd say she was in her late 40s, but it's very hard to tell. I ran right up to the door and opened it, asking her what she needed. I didn't even need to open the door, but again, I was dumb. "There's some kittens out here. Can you help us find them?" she asked, motioning to a younger woman in her 20s who was walking around in the parking lot. "Sure," I said. "I mean, after all, cats. Let's get my shoes on." I closed the door and ran to my bedroom. After putting my shoes on, just as I stepped out of the door to meet the woman in the parking lot, my dad appeared at the door. "What are you doing? Come here." I didn't think I had to tell my dad since I would be right outside the house. Man, was I pissed. "Dad, I'm helping find kittens." The women were both frozen. My dad yelled, "Inside now." My dad is a 6'4", high-ranking military officer, and he can be scary. I stomped inside and saw the women immediately jumped into a van and drove off. In my mind, the women left because they wouldn't be able to find the kittens without me. My dad had a long talk with me that night about Megan's Law, showing me the website, telling me all about the kittens and the puppy ruse. Yikes, I was a dumb kid. I'm going to ask my dad again about this as an adult the next time we talk. Story number 2. My skin crawls thinking about this man. He saw me shopping for school supplies and things for my new apartment one evening during my first week of grad school and decided I was his mark. I just moved to my new college town, didn't even have a cell phone yet, after leaving the one my folks paid for during undergrad behind. I was grown and could take care of myself. What a nitwit I was. As I left the parking lot with my purchases, I noticed his truck pull up right behind me at the exit. It was late and there weren't too many people out. I pulled out and so did he. It was a few miles down a long retail street with lots of stoplights before my turn. As I drove, I realized the guy in the truck was trying to get my attention. I was in a relationship, so I ignored him. Over the next few miles, he kept trying to get me to look at him. Some red lights he would end up ahead of me, some behind or beside me. At every light, he positioned himself so he could stare at me, either directly or in one of his mirrors. His gaze was unwavering and my anxiety rose. He was driving oddly, speeding up close to my bumper, hitting his brakes when he was in front of me, swerving too close to a car a couple of times. Finally, at a red light where he was beside me, I glanced over and absolutely started to panic when I was met with an unbelievably empty, unwavering stare. Realized he was fiddling with himself. He was getting off on the fact that I was terrified, and he was following me. and now he was trying to force me to pull over. At one point, I scooted through an intersection on a hard yellow, a couple of cars ahead of him, thinking I could shake him. Nope. He went around the cars at the light and ran the red and got back in front of me. A freeway entrance ramp came up and I tried to fake him out by putting on my signal and getting into the merge lane for it. He took the bait and started up the ramp. I quickly got out of the merge lane and continued straight. Again, I'd hoped to lose him, but he drove his truck down the embankment to keep following. At another light where he was beside me, I pulled through the light and then turned at the last possible second. He made a U-turn and ran another red to follow me. My panic ramped up at this point. With no cell phone, no sense of direction in a new city, I really didn't know what to do. I turned on classic rock and forced myself to sing along, forced myself to go the speed limit, so I wouldn't crash out of terrified stupidity. I decided to drive to the supermarket across town because I remembered it had a police station in it. He followed me all the way there. He burned out of the lot as soon as he saw all the cop cruisers parked out front. I filed a report and asked for a police escort home. I insisted because something told me this creep was waiting for me to leave the police station. He was. As soon as I pulled out, I saw him. I pulled over and told the officer following me, and he went after him, but the truck had taken off, and the cop couldn't catch him. The police got their surveillance video from the first store. It turned out this jerk had been following me the entire time I was shopping. I saw him on surveillance footage following me through the store. I saw him follow me out, close enough to grab my elbow. I saw footage of him circling the lot in his truck waiting for me to pull out when I took too long to unload my cart. My heart sank. I was able to remember 6 of the 7 digits on his plate and make the model of his truck. In the end, the cops did nothing. They said it was a he said, she said since the surveillance video didn't catch him doing anything unlawful and was a losing case to try and charge him with anything. I ended up trading vehicles with a friend for a couple of months to try and feel safer and went on with my life. I had no idea what this disgusting piece of shit did just a handful of months later, till almost 15 years had passed. I was watching a Discovery ID show about the kidnapping and murder of Sandy Jeffers. I almost fell out of my seat when I saw the mugshot of her killer, Aaron Lee Skeen. It was him. I was so disgusted that law enforcement did nothing in my case that I tracked down the investigator in the murder case. And after verifying some things about his vehicle, they were changed in the TV reenactment to weed out people making crap up. She took my contact info and official statement as well. She could neither confirm nor deny that my run-in was Skeen, but qualified her statement by saying, "At least you don't have to worry about him anymore, because he got life without parole." I only wish something could have been done when he terrorized me. Perhaps things would have been different for Sandy. So creepy, murderous stalker, let's never meet again. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for future content. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. Be sure to listen on to the end of this collaboration. Storytime Cinema will help put you to sleep with all things horror. At the end of our collab, be sure to subscribe to his account immediately.
If you grew up in the suburbs, you were probably a decent distance away from nature. I'm not talking about a park or pond or anything like that, but real deep woods nature. Get away from everything, kinds of nature. I know I was. I grew up outside suburban, and the closest natural camping area was at least 4 hours away. My family had a history of camping. We usually went to the river a few times a year and a few local campsites a few more than that, but we never really got off the grid. Our campsites always had showers, dumpsters, and piped-in water. Fish and game would always patrol at night. Campers and RVs as far as the eye could see. It was fun. I loved being outdoors. I would beg my parents to let me camp in the backyard, but they always held a firm line. You're not old enough to take care of yourself yet. When I was about 16, I had turned a corner in my parents' mind. I was cleaning up after myself, doing my homework right away, helping around the house. I was maturing right in front of them. I was taking care of myself. This time, when I asked if I could camp outside, they sighed and agreed. I was so excited. For my birthday that year, my parents had got me a small, two-person pop-up tent. They said I was ready to sleep alone on our camping trip, but I think they just wanted some privacy, and I did not want to ask why. That was between them and God, and I was happy to stay out of the equation. I planned on staying outside for a 3-day weekend. We had Friday off school because of a local holiday, and I spent the day setting up my site. I cleared the land, set up my tent, went grocery shopping for camping food, and my parents even let me dig a little fire pit. When the sun began to set, I said goodbye to my parents, hiked the 50 feet to my campsite, and started a little fire. I ate about a half dozen s'mores and kept the fire going until around midnight. I spent that time reading comics by the lantern and staying warm. What I noticed is how different familiar places look in the dark. My house was only a stone's throw away from me, but it looked completely foreign and pitch black. When my parents finally shut down for the evening around 11 or so, it looked even more strange. Even in the suburbs, nature has a way of creeping in, especially at night. Just outside your warm low root, the night awakens all kinds of creatures. The crickets sing, owls fly and hoot, raccoons and possums crawl along the ground, dogs around the neighborhood bark and howl in the distance. A lot happens without you even being aware. When I started yawning, I decided that I'd probably had enough. I doused my fire with sand and closed up my shoes for the night. I crawled inside my tent, zipped it up, and laid it inside my sleeping bag. As crickets chirped outside, I slowly drifted off to sleep. Then I heard it. Cliché as it might sound, I heard a stick snap in my yard. I wasn't worried right away. It could be any number of things, but I did open my eyes and listen a lot closer to what was going on outside my tent. I heard the wind blow and the trees in the background rustle, but nothing that sounded like a person walking around. I debated getting up and going outside, but my rational brain kept me in check. If it was a person and they wanted to do me harm, what could I possibly do? I laid my head back down and closed my eyes, but I knew there was no way I was going to fall asleep anytime soon. I kept my ears open and listened for anything out of the ordinary. Any other twig snapping or someone walking through a pile of leaves or something. After 15 minutes or so, satisfied I hadn't heard anything out of the ordinary, I finally drifted off to sleep. When you sleep outside, you wake up when the sun comes up. For me, that was around 6:30 in the morning, and I was not exactly pleased. I had a rough night's sleep and not nearly enough for me. I needed to go to the bathroom, so I put on my flip-flops, unzipped my tent, and walked out. That's when the blood drained from my face. They were hard to see because most of my yard is grass, but in the dirt from my freshly dug fire pit, I saw two as clear as day. They weren't mine. They were huge. My heart nearly came out of my chest. My mouth went dry and my brain felt fuzzy. Was there something outside my tent last night I didn't know? Did I almost die because I was too afraid to check it out? I felt my legs start to wobble a bit, but I caught myself. I sprinted towards my back door, careful not to look behind me. I whipped open the door and was surprised to be greeted with the smell of bacon. My parents were already up and cooking breakfast. They turned to welcome me, but when they saw my chalk-white face, they paused. "You okay, honey?" my mom asked. Yeah, I'm fine," I lied. "You don't look fine," my dad added. "Rough night's sleep is all. I think the neighborhood dogs were excited by the moon or something." "Okay," my mom said, not believing a word I said. "We made some breakfast to surprise you, but you came bursting in here." "Oh yeah, I have to go to the bathroom," I said, and walked out of the room. I went into the bathroom and splashed water in my face and took several deep breaths. I was fine. Nothing happened. I needed to keep my cool or my parents would never let me do anything like this again. I told myself I was being dumb and nothing happened. I almost believed it myself. When I sat down to eat my food, my dad looked over at me and smirked. "What?" "You're a loud snorer," he said with a chuckle. "You heard me from out there?" I said, shoveling eggs into my face. "No," he said, looking away. "I came out last night to check on you." "Dad," I said. "We wanted to make sure you were okay," Mom added. "And it was. You'll understand when you have kids one day." "When did you come outside?" "Around 1-ish, I think." Then the tumblers clicked. "Wait, where did you stand to listen to me?" "In front of your tent. Why?" I started laughing. It was my dad, of course. I nearly shot eggs out of my nose. My parents looked at each other and then back at me. "I had a dream I saw you," I said, lying. I must have seen you outside my tent." "I guess not," I said, catching my breath. "Seriously though, I'm fine. Last night went off without a hitch. Tonight will be no different." They nodded in agreement. I felt fine again. I took a swig of OJ and could feel my entire body relax. There wasn't anyone out there. Why would there be? We're in the middle of suburbia. As the night fell, I once again got a good fire going. I used the stick rubbing method, which took forever, but eventually it got going. And yes, I'm aware how that sounds out of context. I wanted to test myself, to see if I could get something going, for when I eventually did off-the-grid camping. It took a minute, but the food I cooked over the flame that night tasted sweeter because of it. That night was a new moon, and it was pitch black. The only light was my fire, which I kept burning bright, and my gas lantern. After I had finished reading my book for the night and doused my fire, I decided to walk the backyard. Not totally sure why I wanted to do this, but I felt compelled. I started in the front right corner and worked my way around the fence counterclockwise. If my neighbors saw me, they'd assumed I was up to no good, but thankfully they were old and it was too late. I didn't see anything along the fence, which was not surprising. I don't know what the hell I expected to find, but I kept going. When I got to the far right corner, I stopped and stared into the backyard of neighbors directly behind us. I couldn't see much. They had a line of hedges that worked like a privacy fence. The people that lived there were new to the area, and my parents had met them and chatted between the fences. They seemed nice. Their backyard was spotless. As I moved along our fence, I noticed something clinging to the top railing. I swung my lamp around and saw a clump of dried mud that looked like it had been scraped on the metal. I walked over and touched it, and it crumbled and fell to the ground. That's when I saw footprints, the same ones I had seen in the morning in front of my tent. Someone had been there, and it sure as hell wasn't my dad. I froze and didn't know what to think. I suddenly became very aware that I was alone in the darkest night of the month. I decided not to check out the rest of the fence and slowly walked backwards towards my tent. I didn't know if anyone was watching, but I wanted to be ready to run in case they were. Then I heard the gate to my backyard open. In a flash, I quickly shut off my lantern. The darkness was sudden and terrifying. I wanted to run to my house, but whatever was back here now was closer to my back door than I was and would absolutely catch me. I was stuck. I ducked down and squatted along the fence line. I held onto my lantern because if it came down to it, I was going to bash this into the face of whatever the heck had come into our yard. I didn't realize it at first, but I had started to shiver from fear. Whoever walked into my backyard didn't close the gate behind them. My guess was they wanted it for an easy escape route for when they finished. I didn't even want to think about what they wanted to finish. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, but I could still barely make out anything. I saw my tent. The fabric waved a bit in the breeze, and then I saw a figure walking near it. It was a man, and he was big. He moved slowly, methodically, around the tent. He was like an animal stalking its prey. I had kept the windows and doors all zipped up, and if he was going to get in, he was going to have to risk unzipping the tent and waking me up. The man stopped and stared back out at the house. Then he took something out from his waistband. It was a knife. He slowly moved away from the tent and made his way over to the back door. I knew it was unlocked because my parents wanted a way for me to come inside if I got too cold or scared. He was heading inside and my parents were fast asleep. I needed to do something, but my mind was all over the place. I heard him walking up the deck stairs towards the back door, and I knew I was running out of time. I grabbed my lantern and tossed it as hard as I could to the opposite side of the yard. It landed with a smash on the ground. The man stopped and looked over in the direction of the noise. He turned away from my back door and ducked down. He waited a few seconds and then slowly started towards the noise. I looked over and saw the shovel I had used to dig the fire pit. Thankfully, I was just irresponsible enough to have kept it out. I slowly started moving back towards the tent at the same time the man was walking towards the broken lantern. I knew I didn't have a lot of time, and I had to grab the shovel and hide it before he realized it was just a lantern and not a person, before he knew that he was being watched too. I was as quiet as I've ever been. My eyes moved from the shovel to the man. I took shallow breaths and kept moving. As soon as I grabbed the shovel, I ducked down and made my way to the back of the house. I hid along the wall, doing my best to blend along with the shadows. The man got to the fence line and picked up the broken lantern. He turned and headed back towards the tent. I was stunned at how fast he moved. In a few strides, he stood outside the back of the tent. I saw him raise the knife and then slice along the fabric. I could hear it tear from where I was sitting. Then, with violence I have not ever witnessed since he'd stabbed down violently into my sleeping bag, again and again he was focused on making whoever was in that tent pay. My legs felt like jello, my mouth was dry and I could barely catch my breath, but I knew I had to do something, and my window for the action he was closing. If I didn't get to him now while he was distracted, I was never going to get to him. As quickly and quietly as a deer, I ran towards him with the shovel above my head. As soon as I came within striking distance, I slammed the shovel down on his head. The man stumbled back and clenched his head. I had raised it to strike again, but he scrambled out of reach. I yelled as loud as my voice could go. I kept yelling. Behind me, the lights to my parents' room snapped on. So did the neighbors, all of them, I think. The man got up, dropped his knife, and ran, hitting the gate and stumbled as he ran away. My parents came rushing out, and I dropped into their arms in tears. I never hugged them tighter in my life. The police came and took a report, roped off the scene, and took evidence. I learned later that a few people had been stabbed to death a few towns over, and this was probably the same person. It didn't make me feel any better. Nothing ever came from the police report. They never found the guy. My parents installed security cameras, and our camping trips dropped to 0. I've had a lot of counseling over the years, and I've even gone camping from time to time. Never managed to do any off-the-grid camping. I had a strange request from my parents. I wanted his knife. I knew it was evidence and I might not ever get to see it, but I had to ask. The police said they needed to hold on to it, but about 5 years later, they closed the case and gave it to me. I still have it, a memento of the bravest thing I've ever done. I've moved on from that town and tried to leave everything in the past. Every once in a while, I get a tickle down my spine like someone's watching me. It's probably PTSD, but sometimes I wonder. I always look for footprints in the soil outside my house. So far, I haven't seen any. But last night when I tried to let my dog out in the backyard, I swear I heard someone jump over my fence.